Welcome, all you web villains out there. This is Peter DiLorenzo, the auto extremist. This is the High-Octane Truth number 3. I have my buddy Eric Tritko in the waiting in the wings here, and it's kind of been a momentous week for the auto extremist. It's the first really political column I've ever done on the site. I did several political oriented columns in the midst of the government witch hunt in the hearings in Washington about the failure of Detroit and the failure of the Detroit car companies. I actually did a compilation book of those columns called Witch Hunt. But today was the first time I did basically political commentary. I didn't want to per se, but I just had enough with what has been going on in the political arena, especially with Mr. Trump and his insistence on basically telling lies about what Ford does in the US and Mexico and how he would fix it when he's president. And pretty much everything he's said since he started talking about it in June was incorrect and basically lies. And he had the audacity just 2 days ago when he had the opportunity to basically come out and say, okay, I was wrong. But no, he insisted he was right, and he insisted he had coerced Ford by his speeches to back down from building plants in the US and building a huge new plant, building plants in Mexico, and then in turn building a huge new plant in the US. None of it was true. Ford announced in April they were building 2 new plants in Mexico. Ford has been in Mexico for 90 years. They have over 11,000 employees in Mexico. They were building 2 new plants in 2 Mexican states. And the Donald insisted, oh, I'm going to call Mark Fields up and I'm going to tax him, 33% on every vehicle brought into this country. Of course, just in, the president doesn't set tax policy, never has, never will. It's called the Ways and Means Committee. And the thing that drove me crazy is he had the opportunity 2 days ago on the Today Show in this convoluted town hall to set the record straight and say, well, I got that wrong. But he didn't. He insisted he had gotten Ford to back down, and now they're building a big plant in the US. And I have to give Ford credit. They came out with a statement that said, look, we made our plans to do what we're doing in 2011, long before any presidential campaign was on the agenda. And I was glad to see Mark Fields get a little exercise with Trump today and, sort of indirectly slam him in a quote, which he deserved. But, I just, I've had enough. This country deserves better. It really does. I mean, let's face it. Trump is, a celebrity, whatever that means, businessman, sort of a third-tier celebrity and reality TV host. And, his candidacy early on was amusing. He got a lot of great comments off about the paralysis in Washington. And, hey, they were all good. We laughed along with him. But, now it's getting a little more serious. And I expect him to be serious. This, we as a country have monumental problems facing us. We live in a world where we play by the rules and none of our global competitors play by any rules whatsoever, or they make them up as they go along when it's advantageous to them. That's not really great for us, but we consistently act like, Jimmy Stewart, going to Washington and expecting all these countries to act like we do. Well, guess what? They don't. And, our manufacturing base is being threatened by global competitors. They don't play fair. Or, as I said, they don't go by any rules whatsoever. We have friends acting like enemies and enemies masquerading as friends. We're being threatened by enemies that want to destroy us and everything we stand for, because our very existence is a threat to their dark vision of a dead world that they want us all to be in. And the paralysis in Washington among our stumble-bum politicos is a dismal disgrace and an insult to every American. And here comes Donald Trump, who wants to be taken seriously. And, I can't abide this dragging the automobile industry into the political arena. Not only that, but just telling flat out lies and being given every opportunity to set the record straight and admit he was wrong. And instead he doubles down and says, I was right and I got Ford to do this, and I got Ford to do that. Ford didn't do shit because of Donald Trump. They had those plans laid in there, and he's just spewing this bullshit. And I finally had enough, I just can't believe that we as a country are going to sit back and allow this third-tier celebrity, this belligerent, classless, no-talent lying hack to get anywhere near the Oval Office. I just can't believe that that's a possibility. And so that's why I wrote that column. I stand by every word. It was not an endorsement of anybody. Some of my readers took that to mean that, I'm against someone or for someone. Not at all. I'm just against stupidity. And Donald Trump is just conducting himself like the boorish lowlife he really is. He may have been intermittently successful in business, and he may have, brought us some laughs in the early days of the campaign, but he had better get straight here and better start weighing in with some serious stances on substantive issues, or he will forever be the joke that I think he is. And this Ford thing just put me over the edge, because he's just flat out lying and had a chance to fix it and he didn't. So that's why I wrote that column. So Eric, what's on your mind? I mean, we started to talk about this via email, and we have a bunch of other stuff to talk about, but.
Yeah, I will echo a lot of your sentiments about Donald Trump. And a lot of this goes to me being a political junkie going back 30, Jesus, that's scary to think, 30 years. I mean, in high school, I watched the McLaughlin Group 30 years ago. I mean, what sane high schooler does that? Well, I did, and I used to watch every political talk show there was and be deep into it. So yeah, I watched this from a bit of afar, because I had to disconnect 10 to 12 years ago with a lot of stuff going on in politics. How it shortly after the 2000 election, it was no longer, okay, let's find a happy middle. It was my side, your side, and if my side can't win, then let's nuke the planet from space just to make sure that there's no scrap for anyone else. Worse than take my ball and run home with it.
Yeah, the discord in this country and the lack of,
there is no room for middle ground anymore. It's literally held hostage by both ends, the extreme of both ends. On top of that, there's a whole, and we can talk about, there's a whole separate thing of the news media, but one of the oldest tricks in the book is, if you really want to make the other side look like a clown show, find the biggest clown and make them kind of look rational. And I think that's what the media has done with Donald Trump, and he's a willing participator in that whole thing.
Yeah, I won't deny that he is a master manipulator of the media. I mean, they have just, bought into this hook, line, and sinker. Let's face it, the networks are whores for content. They absolutely live and die by content.
Yep.
And this guy is just like, wind him up and he'll be on the phone on Morning Joe and every talk show, and that's fine.
Yeah, he prints money every time he opens his mouth for any media outlet that wants to cover it.
I mean, the guy's, I will give him this, he's gifted at it. He may be the most gifted guy on camera since Ronald Reagan, but that doesn't mean he should keep, you know.
Yeah. I think his run is beginning to get a little old, or people are beginning to tire of the circus. There's some poll numbers showing some other people starting to gain a little ground. I mean, this is all just sort of preamble anyways. It doesn't begin to get kind of serious till after the first of the year. And then really come midsummer is really when everything, really gets down and dirty. And I think by then he'll have given himself enough rope to hang himself by that point. So, but I agree with you. We need, I almost don't care what side it comes from anymore, but someone who will come forward with a solid energy plan for a 15, 20, 30-year plan, and not let's keep piecemealing this together like we have been for so long. A solid industrial plan, and someone willing to stick to it, and someone who can get both sides of the aisle to at least semi sort of agree that, okay, this isn't good for both people, or neither side's going to win, except as a country we will be going forward in somewhat of a reasonable direction. Whether that person exists in this election cycle, I have no idea. I frankly doubt it. But those are the things that we need to be looking for in our leaders from my standpoint. But I've been saying that for 10 years now. So
yeah, well, amen to that. I want leadership, and I don't care where it comes from. But this country desperately needs leadership, substantive leadership with true direction and true vision.
Yep.
We don't need knee-jerk reactionaries firing off quips to get media attention and sound bites, and it's just enough of that. Okay, let's move on. That's the end of our political discussion. And other big news is all the fanboys got their hands on the new NSX, and it's pretty much, they showed the car 3 years ago and then sort of said, gee, we better build it now. And I guess they totally tore up the direction of the car halfway through. And so it's finally in the fanboys' hands. My problem is the new NSX, I know the jammed with technology and this and that, hybrid, whatever, but 3,800 pounds, really? Yeah. From Honda? The Honda, the motor company, the experts at lift, lightweight, add lightness, wonderfully composed vehicles that are not, ponderous or heavy or any of that. And, in the old Hondas that we all loved and loved to drive, I mean, the S2000 is one of my all-time favorite cars. And this is what they weigh in with, a 3,800-pound NSX. Now, I don't understand it because, as I pointed out on the table, I mean, even the true believers at GM took a long, hard look at the Camaro and got 300 pounds out of it. And so I think Honda, whatever the explanation or the rationale, or, well, it does this, does that, I don't really care. It just doesn't seem like what Honda would do after all this time with the new NSX.
My friend and colleague Zach Bowman, who's working over at Road and Track, I think the last paragraph of his review kind of sums it up. I'll try to run through it quickly, but I think it sums it up exactly what you're saying. It's Honda wanted the NSX to be an everyday supercar, but by definition, a supercar isn't an everyday affair. It's a special thing reserved for special days, and if you buy one, you never want to quietly tiptoe out of the valet stand under electric power. You want to rattle the crystal under the hotel roof. You want to throw open the garage doors on a gorgeous day and bend the asphalt to your will. If there's a compromise, you want it to be in pursuit of performance, not livability. There was a time when you felt a little NSX in your Accord. Now there's too much Accord in your NSX.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care what they say. And then somebody tweeted that the head of the development program said, this is what people in 911s are going to step up to. Oh, really? You got to be kidding me with that. I mean, as if that's going to happen. And I will say this for Porsche. I mean, as much, you know, the 9/11s are big and not like what we remember and all that. But, you know, they've managed to keep the weight under control. So I don't know what the accurate brain trust excuse is, but I'm not buying it. All right, let's move on to motorsports, and we'll start with Talladega, which
And another cluster.
yeah, another cluster. And I mean, let's face it. You know, as I've said to the audience before, and my readers know this, I'm NASCAR's biggest critic. But my critic is directed as the management of NASCAR, not to the teams and the drivers and the crew people who are some of the most talented in the world. And so what we had on Talladega, you know, what went on at Talladega on Sunday, as I said in my fumes count, reinforced the perpetual jackass image that haunts NASCAR. One that the powers that be in Daytona Beach are so desperate to get out from under. It was simply beyond embarrassing, a display of hubris, short-sightedness, and stupidity that knows no bounds. To have last year's champion be forced to stay in the race when he had no business doing so in order to make the next round of the playoff was simply ridiculous and wildly unsafe besides. I mean, he took out half the field. And to have 4 drivers, 3 of them multi-race winners, be eliminated from the chase because of the rampant gimmickry that its underlying is its underlying reason for being is simply inexcusable. You know, and I think the car owners, teams, and drivers are stuck between a rock and a hard place in this whole thing. They love to compete, and the success of NASCAR has given them access to a lifestyle that would be simply impossible to comprehend otherwise. So they're reluctant to criticize the series because NASCAR, let's face it, has pumped millions upon millions of dollars, not only into their pockets, but into Charlotte and the surrounding region. And if you've ever been down there, you know what I mean. This is NASCAR has elevated the lifestyle of that area to the point where it's unbelievable. And but you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's no excuse. Those very same team owners and drivers have to band together and demand substantive changes in the way that NASCAR goes about its business. This goes well beyond the ongoing franchise discussions, which are already happening, because this gets to the heart of the matter of the relevance of NASCAR going forward. If the players involved want to see the sport survive, let alone thrive, they're going to have to force this issue right here and right now. They can't just, you know, fume through the rest of the chase and forget about it over the 6-week break and come back to Daytona testing, rested and ready to repeat the same scenario all over again. They can't do it. They'll all have to dispense with their usual downtime and seriously force NASCAR to have a focused 3-day discussion about accountability, visibility, integrity, and the future. You know, short of that, I don't know where this place is going. And then, after all of this and all of the hand wringing and all the, you know, everyone going nuts because, you know, Talladega ended on a caution instead of a green, whatever. Then NASCAR comes out and says, well, we basically locked in our schedule for the next 5 years. Yeah, there is a slight room to add a different track in there, but really? I mean, this is a racing organization that has too many races, too many repeat visits to the same tracks, declining attendance, declining TV numbers, and this is the best they can do. That, oh, well, we're really proud that we can lock in for our partners our schedule going forward for basically 5 years. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, that's the problem is, or every time that the team owners start to think about, or even drivers start to think about getting together to try and force change, then France comes out and says, well, we can't have unions in NASCAR, and those are going to be unions. And that gets to high-end lawyer stuff real fast right there. But, you know, there is, and from the team owners, as you say, are stuck between a rock and a hard place because they've got sponsors writing checks for tens of millions of dollars. It's not like they can say, well, we want to sit out and protest it, because, you know, you can't when there's that much money being fronted to you. It would have to be a combination of teams, drivers, sponsors, and more importantly, the manufacturers getting behind this and saying, this is enough. You know, if you want us to keep coming and playing, great, we want to, but
yeah, nothing's going to happen unless the manufacturers say, you know what, time out here.
Yeah.
We can't continue this. We've got to come up with a new idea. We can't continue to watch the erosion of this sport any longer. Now, the only reason NASCAR keeps getting these big TV contracts is, as I've said many times before, these networks are whores for content. They have almost an insatiable need for content. They don't care where it is almost or where it comes from, but they have to have it. So NASCAR, they can show an Xfinity race with 3 people in the stands and be happy about it. And you know, and then the Xfinity teams can go and show their sponsors, well, look, we've got, you know, 27, 28, 30 races on television. So this thing kind of perpetuates itself. But at some point, somebody's going to have to step forward and say, you know what, this isn't working. Right. It won't be the brain trust in Daytona Beach, unfortunately. It's going to have to be forced upon them, just like the Gen 6 cars were forced upon them to get rid of the car tomorrow. So who knows what's going to happen? But you know, as far as I can say, tell the drivers is, you know, don't bitch about it unless you're going to, you know, ban the government and do something about it. So. Yeah. All right, one more racing thing is that we went from the sublime to the ridiculous in MotoGP racing. We went from one of the greatest, if not the greatest, MotoGP race in the history of MotoGP at Phillip Island in Australia. And then we go to, what was it, Malaysia?
Sepang in Malaysia, yeah.
Yeah, and then we go there, and that link to that column you sent me, I mean, it was dead on. It reminded me of when, you know, I have all due respect for Ayrton Senna. I know people worship his memory and everything, and so I'm not trying to offend anyone, but when Senna purposely drove Prost off the track, the magic for me went away. I mean, there's something not right there, to use your race car as a missile. So to see Valentino Rossi and Marc Marquez get into it, and Valentino clearly trying to take Marquez out, it just left me a feeling of sadness that it has come to that.
Yeah, I mean, it started way back in the Thursday press conference, and when Rossi dropped his big bomb of saying, you know, Marquez was really never a fan, that he was purposely trying to hold him up in Australia and some other things, and even through practice and qualifying, they kind of had some run-ins. I just before we did this, I was rewatching the race again, and having read as much as I could, watched it from every angle I can. It's one of those things where I think they're both at fault here, but as you say, because Rossi is who he is, that's the bigger thing. I mean, there's one angle where it shows, like, it almost looks like Marquez headbutts Rossi's knee puck, and as an instinctual reaction, Rossi kicks his knee out or his leg out and catches his brake lever, which caused the crash. So, I mean, there's plenty of stuff going on back, but yeah, like you said, it's certainly, Rossi was always known as a master manipulator, great at playing the head games, and he's had some incidences throughout the years where he and someone he was racing with for a championship have come to blows on track, essentially. I mean, he and Gieber now at Jerez are kind of legendary on that one, and there's one or two other ones, but this was really there for everyone to see, especially with as much pressure as in the championship right now. So yeah, he got a point taken away from him, and he starts at the back of the grid for this last race at Valencia a week from Sunday.
Yeah, and short of one of the greatest rides of his life, the likelihood of being able to take the championship is pretty slim.
He leads by 6 points, I think, coming in. And if he finishes directly behind Lorenzo, he still will win it. And then there's a whole sliding scale of where depending on where he is. So is impossible for him to win? No, but Valencia has never been one of his good tracks. In fact, it's usually one of his worst tracks of the year. So it's you know, as you say, disappointing.
Yeah, it was disappointing, but you know, hopefully it'll be a great race. But to just put a sour note on everything.
Yep, exactly.
Well, that about does it for this week. Eric, thank you. And, you know, and thanks for everyone out there to watch this new venture of Auto Extremist TV. We intend on being back at least once a week for the foreseeable future. And, you know, we appreciate it. And that's the High-Octane Truth for this week.
Don't forget to take it offline.
Yeah.